So I think we'll get started and others can join as they come in. So just a few brief introductions before we get into the thick of it. So Food for Thought is a program within Stronger Together, and that's our portfolio of capacity building work at the Athena Advisors. So it's for professionals involved in social justice work. It's an informal gathering of people who learn from one another and discussing some of the most challenging issues of our time. The Athena Advisors is a social enterprise using our knowledge, experience, and connections to assist mission-driven organizations by improving their fundraising approach and ability, creating a more equitable, more sustainable world. Today's theme is tech and fundraising, and we'll be considering the role of data and tech in the charity sector, its value in relationship building, and why we should all be more comfortable using tech for good, data for good. So first off, I'll introduce Jackie, who's a senior consultant at the Athena Advisors. She's passionate about philanthropy, data analysis, and public service. Jackie is pursuing a Master of Public Administration with a focus in nonprofit management from the University of Baltimore. She's worked in the nonprofit space for the past decade. Most recently, she helped raise funds for St. Vincent de Paul of Baltimore, the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence, the Center for Public Integrity, and Jewish Recovery Houses. She's an active member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals and the American Evaluation Association. Jackie, you keep busy. Sarah Gammoh is the founder and CEO of Charizone. Charizone is a robust data platform aimed at promoting confident charitable giving by presenting charities' performance in a relevant, comparable, and user-friendly way. Their mission is to inspire the philanthropic community to use wealth for good and to empower charities to create lasting impact. Sarah brings her entrepreneurial passion and extensive private sector experience to the charity sector. She started her career in the banking world, working for the likes of the Royal Bank of Scotland and ABN AMRO Bank, and then transitioned into roles in fintech startups, impact finance, ESG, and corporate governance and charities. She's a constant volunteer and sits on the board of directors of the UK Sustainable Investment and Finance Association. Sarah, you've also been busy. So over to Jackie and Sarah, who will talk us through this exciting topic. And do note any questions that you have as we move through in the chat, and then we will address them in the Q&A session. So over to you and Jackie.
Thank you, Lucy, for that lovely introduction. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us. So I wanted to frame our discussion today because, as the title of the event suggests, we'll be talking about technology and fundraising. But as Sarah and I have held a number of discussions over the course of the past few weeks, we focused a lot on data and the role that data plays in the philanthropic sector. So I'll be sharing my perspective as someone who's worked as a frontline fundraiser for many years. And I'll get into why I was drawn to this work and what motivates me, and how my relationship to data and tech has evolved and continues to evolve pretty much daily. And Sarah shortly will be sharing a bit of her story and what motivated her to create Charizone. So throughout our discussion, we'll be shifting viewpoints kind of from the fundraiser's perspective and the philanthropist's perspective. So my intention for the presentation is I hope it inspires you all to reflect on how you think about philanthropy, data, and tech. And I hope we can spark some interesting discussions. So we'll start with an audience question. What comes to mind when you hear the word philanthropy? Feel free to pop your thoughts in the chat or share if you're so compelled. Doing good. Simple, but appropriate, Lucy. Doing good, yes. Anyone else? Giving. Yep. So doing good and giving. Those words also come to my mind. So the Oxford wealth. Yes, wealth as well. We can't forget that one. The Oxford Dictionary defines philanthropy as the desire to promote the welfare of others, expressed especially by the generous donation of money to a good cause. I'm sure many of you know that the word is derived from the Greek words philos, meaning love or loving, and anthropos, meaning humankind. And as I was reflecting on what philanthropy means to me, I was thinking about how this love for humankind goes both ways in the philanthropic sector. Donors want to express their love by supporting meaningful causes and making the world a better place. And fundraisers like myself have the honor of supporting donors and funders in fulfilling their philanthropic desires. And it really is an honor, at least for me. So I was called to do this work not because I was explicitly interested in data or technology. Quite the opposite, actually. I've always considered myself, or I used to consider myself, a low tech person and not really savvy with data. But over the past few years, I've started to see myself in a different light. And I've started to use more technology and data. But why I was originally called to do this work is because I wanted to connect with people and build authentic relationships with people. And hopefully those relationships will promote social welfare and goodwill. So as I was reflecting on the theme of the talk today, I was reminded by a story about Larry. So I want to share that with you all. Early on in my career, I was working for a nonprofit media organization. And I was teaching myself how to use their CRM technology. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management, basically the donor database. And we were using Razor's Edge, and I hadn't had much experience with using Razor's Edge. So I was practicing, and I practiced by running a series of queries in the database. So I started asking questions of the technology. I pulled a list of donors who gave over $150 last year. I pulled a list of folks who had given the past 3 years, and those who had been given in the past 10 years. This sounds pretty basic for those of you who have been in fundraising, but it was a great way to practice using this new piece of technology. And through this process, I discovered a very loyal donor named Larry, and he had been giving to the organization almost every year since its founding in 1989. I wrote him a handwritten thank you note, and I asked him what inspired him to give, because I genuinely wanted to know. And a few weeks later, I got a response from Larry in the mail. Larry was in his 80s, and he's, over the course of the next 6 years, Larry and I exchanged a series of letters and phone calls. He sent me op-eds. He told me stories about his life. And it was a really unique experience developing a relationship with Larry. He shared a lot with me. He gave me feedback on the events that he attended for the organization. And I even used one of his quotes in an annual appeal. And I actually still have the quote. You can see this letter is a little worn, but he wrote, "Integrity courses through the veins of investigative reporters and their associates. Feedback from the public they serve is the sustenance for refreshing hearts to discover from afar they are not alone in their quest." So I took this quote from Larry. I used it in an annual appeal, which performed pretty well, if I recall correctly. And And over the course of, I stayed in touch with Larry for years, even after I left the organization. And during my time there, Larry did increase his the amount of his donations and the frequency of his giving, which is definitely a win in terms of a fundraiser's perspective. But really the most meaningful aspect of this story is the relationship that I built with Larry. And I really think that this touches on the essence of philanthropy and what it means to be philanthropic and the relationship building aspect of this work that we do. So thank you for letting me share. I want to kick it over to Sarah to give her a chance to introduce herself and introduce the topic.
Thank you very much, and thank you for Athena Consulting for having me, Advisors for having me. And yes, Jack and I had an enjoyable time preparing for this conversation. It is a big topic. Talk about philanthropy, where to begin, data, another huge topic, and technology. But don't worry, we're not going to get into AI, ChatGPT this time, maybe next time. But just to kind of start with my genesis, the genesis of my story with the philanthropic, with my work in the charity sector. I have always given to charities, whether it's financially or through volunteering as part of my social values and my faith. But I've often felt the frustration of not being close enough or not being engaged enough with the organizations that I'm supporting. And that just kind of took me into the journey of trying to find more information and trying to find more knowledge about charitable organizations, the work that they do. And most importantly, as Jackie said, as Larry said, is the engagement and the feedback from the public that they serve, which is the reason why we are giving and supporting charities, and the reason why charities do exist, which is their charitable mission. So this is really where the start of my journey in this sector. But it also in general, I think I love the kind of the definition of doing good for philanthropy. In general, we are finding that there's more drive towards doing good in everything that we do. What we eat, where we shop, where we work, how we spend our money, how we invest our money, and of course, how we give our money. So it's interesting to see the change in the trends in philanthropy and the change in the philanthropic strategies towards giving. And basically just wanted to kind of start this conversation by introducing some of the trends that we're seeing in philanthropic strategies. The first one to begin with is the trust-based philanthropy, which is the movement away from giving project-based funding, which is restricted funding, and moving more towards supporting the organization in their operation via unrestricted funds. We're finding that this is more of a language amongst the philanthropic community, wanting to build trust, wanting to support the growth of the organization. We can talk about anything in the questions. Let's please make this as interactive as possible. Please throw any questions you like out there for me. The other trend we're seeing is what we call collaborative giving, which is when philanthropists and organizations pool their resources and their expertise to address social issues. So by combining effort, they aim to achieve greater impact than what they would achieve if they've done things individually. Collaborative philanthropy often involves partnership, consortiums, collective impact initiatives, and working across the various prospects of the charity's work. And there's also innovation and risk-taking, which I'm going to quote Bill Gates on this. He was spot on when he said that philanthropy should be taking bigger risks than businesses. If these were easy problems to solve, then businesses and governments can come in and solve them. But that's where the needs for philanthropic capital, philanthropic risk-taking, and philanthropic wealth to come in. Finally, not finally, but one of the other kind of trends that we're seeing is capacity building, which is interested in things outside and other than on top of the financial support. These strategies focus on strengthening the organization's capabilities, which includes training, monitoring, technical assistance, resources, etc., to term sustainability. So what in conclusion, we're seeing smarter philanthropy, we're seeing value-driven philanthropy, and in general, we're seeing more philanthropy, which is fantastic. And I do think that the main reason for that is the change of technology that we are all currently witnessing. Technology has really revolutionized communication, democratized information access, and really has accelerated globalization. And biggest example is how social media is being part of our everyday life. So this is how we're bringing the topics of philanthropy and technology together as an introduction.
Thank you, Sarah. So this takes us to our next question. We're going to start getting into the tech and the data. So what comes to mind when you hear the word technology, tech? Or what comes to mind when you hear the word data?
Is it a terrifying topic?
Confusing, yes.
Thanks for the honesty.
Numbers, yes. Yes, confusing and numbers. That both of those resonate with me. Data, yes. AI. Understanding. Oh, I like that, Peggy. Yeah, I'm hoping to continue deepening my understanding of technology and data analysis. And I think that's a great perspective, Peggy, because it can be intimidating, it can be confusing, it can feel over our heads, intimidating. Spreadsheets, yes, Katrina. But I think it's really important that we all develop a certain level of confidence and comfortability with exploring new technologies, exploring data analysis, even if we don't consider ourselves a qualitative or a technical person. Technology is evolving and our access to data is expanding. I mean, daily, really. Better decision making. Yes, Peggy, absolutely. And that's really what this discussion is about. How do we use technology and data to inform our decisions and make the sector more effective by improving the relationships between funders and charities. So, Sarah, this question is for you. How would you describe the data about charities, and how that data is accessible to donors or to philanthropists and funders?
Thank you, Jackie. I'm just smiling because this is, again, another huge topic, but hopefully this is all like an introduction. And please do ask questions in the chat and keep us engaged and keep us kind of on our toes, please, with the questions. So basically, when we look at the trends that I've discussed, kind of mentioned earlier in the philanthropic strategies, we can see how each of them is going to require different set of questions, different set of information from the donors and from the philanthropic community. For example, trust-based philanthropy is now focusing on outcome and the running of the organization. So basically, questions asked would be whether a charity is publishing an impact report, if there's a social value UK report. Sorry, this is quite kind of UK specific, if there's any social return on investment data available. They also look at the running of the organization. So there's interest in the board of trustees. What is their lived experience? EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion is a key topic now. Everyone is interested in. They also look at the kind of wide operation of the organization. And they look at the funding sources, they're looking at the diversification of income and their charitable spending. Again, with the notes, I'm just trying to interpret how to read these numbers and how to understand the work the charity is doing. Collaborative giving, on the other hand, would be more interested on information on the regarding the cause that they're serving. Is this an underserved area, or is it well represented? How many charities are in this category? Are they local? Are they international? Does the charity have partners or collaborators? Are there any hubs around that cause? Capacity building would be understanding more about the skills and the matchmaking between the skills of the philanthropist and the skills of the charity. So we could see that there's always a room for different kind of different types of information, different types of data that donors might ask. And we know that in general, this is not information that charities regularly and consistently publish. Here in the UK, it is mainly the trustees' annual report and account annual review, and perhaps some impact report that we can rely on as standard information that the charities is putting out there along with their websites. And therefore, there is an information gap. The information that the donors want to hear is not the same as what the charities are putting out there. And that is creating an information gap. And I know this could sink the heart, this could add kind of more burden and additional work to the charities. But this is where Charizone comes in. We are interested in bridging the knowledge gap between the donors and the charities without adding to the charities' fatigue, without adding more requests. So here, our work is focused on the UK at the moment. So we looked carefully, and we found that there is guidance from the sector on how to run a good charity. Guidance comes from organizations such as the Charity Commission, which has SORP, Charity Governance Code, NCVO, Akivo, for example. They all have sector codes and good practice standards that we are able to, from which we are able to create a narrative that is holistic, standard, and scalable. We currently look at charities that are over £500,000 in annual income. We can discuss, that's another topic. But so we're looking at the larger charities as defined by the sector. So what we look at is, again, from the information that is consistently being published across all the larger charities, we start to look at the performance of a charity from a broad overview perspective. We look at the impact of the charity. So impact is the change that is created by the charity, whether it is positive or negative. So we expect charities to have positive impact and to report on this transparently. There's guidance from SORP as a minimum, but also there is more guidance from Social Value UK and NCVO. But we know that many charities go further than the minimum requirement, and they demonstrate their effectiveness in achieving their charitable mission, which is exciting to see. We also consider the governance of a charity. Good governance is really key. It is more than just the compliance with the law and relevant regulations. It is also adhering to best practice. So we look for an effective board of trustees, which is fundamental for the success of a charity, and for promoting a safe, open, and transparent environment. And finally, so we look at the impact governance, and finally we look at the finances of the charities. So we look for financial health by looking at key issues common across all charities, which is their financial management, their sustainability, and their efficiency in using their in their operation, using their funds. And again, there's a lot of by keeping a broad overview, we are rising above the differences in business model, in causes, in operations, in the charities, and we are creating a standard narrative that is that would enable the philanthropic community to compare between one organization and the other. So basically, we define what good charity looks like based on information that is already out there, but it is scattered and fragmented at this stage. And we compare it to the framework that we've pulled together from existing sector codes and best practice standards. And we also take an apply or explain approach, which is key to allow for the differences between organizations. So this is, we hope, is a starting point for creating sector standards, which would be form a strong foundation to create a good relationship between charities and donors, and a good conversation that is focused on adding value and looking at the kind of insights between these two organizations. Again, this is high-level summary from my end. It'd be great to hear from you, Jackie, how you describe the state of donor data for charities.
Taking sort of the flip side of that is what data is accessible to nonprofits and charities that can make them more efficient and effective in achieving their mission. And if I had to assess it and analyze it, I would say that there is a ton of data out there. I'm not sure if I would describe it as an information gap, maybe a tech gap, maybe a technical knowledge gap, because there's a ton of donor data, a lot of which an organization can collect organically. Donor data looks like biographical information, contact information, a donor's giving history with the organization, a history of communications that the organization had with this person, event attendance. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the concept of moves management. So, some type of data structure framework that can describe where a donor is in the donor life cycle. So to me, that's very essential donor data, and a lot of it can be collected organically. But it's really important that organizations actually have the technology that they need to collect this information, store it, access it, and utilize it to make decisions. As Peggy mentioned, the importance of making data-informed decisions. It's really important that the data is being collected and that it can be accessed and used appropriately. So that's all. A lot of that information can be collected organically, as I mentioned. And then there's the role of prospect research, wealth screenings, collecting additional data about individuals and foundations and other types of funders. That information is out there. There's a variety of tools that nonprofits and charities can access to expand the information that they have on their supporters. But I mean, there's many publicly available data sets that have a wealth of information. So again, I wouldn't say it's so much of an information gap, but being able to, I would say the gap comes in with organizations having the technology that they need, and not duplicating technology. Having the different systems talk to one another is really essential. So that's how I would describe the landscape. So we've heard from Sarah about charity data for funders and donors, and I touched on the donor data for charities. So let's get into a little bit more tech and how to use it to build relationships. Another question for the audience. So when you think about the strength of the relationship between charities and donors, the trust, the access to information, how would you rate it on a scale from 1 to 10, meaning 0 the weakest, 10 being the strongest? 10 would mean that the relationship is very strong, that donors feel completely confident that they have all the information that they need about a charity to make an informed decision, and charities feel like they have the best information about their supporters that they can use actionably. 0 would mean it's very fuzzy and confusing, and maybe we're missing a lot of connections. This is kind of an interesting thought experiment because we're using numbers and we're taking these abstract big concepts and trying to put a number to them. But I'd be curious to kind of gauge what you all think. Is anyone brave enough to share?
Jackie, I'm sorry, can you clarify is it an overarching, you're looking at it broadly? Can you just state the first part of the question again?
How would you rate the strength of the relationship between donors and funders at large and the charitable sector at large? I mean, it is a
in
very
general
broad question. Very general,
okay.
A lot of our discussions were about how to take these big concepts and bring them down to the ground level, but it's also about, I think, perception of the industry at large. You know, there can be skepticism, there can be hope about the philanthropic sector and its ability to partner with donors and build trust. Interesting. Okay. Peggy said 4.
That's excluding the Athena
5.
Advisors, of course.
Yeah, this is in general. I mean, obviously we have outliers that do an outstanding job. But I'm seeing most of the responses are on the lower end, 5 or less, which says to me that we have a lot of work to do. And there certainly is a lot of improvement that can be made. So my question for you, Sarah, is about what is your experience of using data to build relationships between funders and charities?
Yeah, so thank you for this. And this is really, really interesting. And when Jack and I were discussing, we're preparing for this, we kind of either gone down the technical and the details of the data and the kind of systems we are using and the technology. But actually, we felt that the conversation needs to be maybe precisely at this level, which is between the relationships between donors and philanthropists. From my perspective, and if we kind of take this back to the definition of philanthropy, the Oxford Dictionary definition of philanthropy, there is love in the word, and there's love in everything that we do. So we acknowledge that philanthropy is about the heart, but at the same time, we definitely think that there is room for the head to be part of the process. So while we talk about data, and some of you define it as spreadsheets and numbers, it'd be good to kind of shed light on the nature of the data we are referring to. So the data is both qualitative and quantitative, and in fact, we're dealing more with qualitative data that tends to be subjective, but we are using processes to make sure that this is as objective as possible. And while we use the word data to build the narrative, it's really the information and the meaning behind the data that we're focusing on for better decision making, to be informed. Data for the sake of data is really just data. And another thing to highlight is one of our data points at Charizone is storytelling. So we really do acknowledge the need for storytelling as one of the more effective ways of sharing a charity's good work, which really, when balanced with transparent and comprehensive information about the charity's operation, it is a very effective way of engaging and building long-term relationships with donors. So basically, we want to build relationships that involve both the heart and the head. Another way of looking at these relationships is through the lens of partnerships. So partnership implies trust, and that there's a long-term nature, which really creates a healthy environment for charities to be innovative and to focus on delivering their charitable mission in the best possible way. And also, we're keen for the charities to be able to share their learning with us, which is successes and failures. We see that there's a temptation to overclaim achievements, and there's always really positive news that comes out of all the reporting that we see. It's actually consistently only positive news, but we think that openness about limitations and even failures sometimes reflects the integrity and the transparency of the organization, and is really indicative that this organization has has a learning culture and is ready to change and to learn from their experience. So we think that dealing with the information gap or dealing with the asymmetry of information is really important to deal with with issues around power balance or imbalances between donors and charities, which I know is a huge, just a huge topic on its own. So we're hoping that thinking of relationships as partnerships is going to help foster collaboration, problem-solving initiatives, which really is going to make the relationships more rewarding for everyone. Again, it's easy, kind of talking at this level, it's easy to think that there's one solution that fits all, there's one narrative that fits all. But it is just important to know that we're looking to connect donors with charities and encourage the donors themselves to connect with the charities and create a personalized relationship with them, where they could ask for insights, information, and find the charities that align with their values and charitable strategy. So it's really back to the heart. It's more of a personalized connection between the two in order to get the long-term and the trust. So we're really hoping that there's better engagement, so there's more trust, there's more legitimacy in the sector, and there's more accountability and transparency, which is just good for all. This is my perspective. Jackie, it'd be great to know what you're seeing in terms of using data to build relationships from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely about the need for transparency, truth, reporting on, like you said, the failures as well as the successes. And ideally, charities and nonprofits would be able to spend more time on their mission and not get bogged down by limitations. And I think one of the best ways to ensure that happens is to have a strong and stable technical ecosystem or infrastructure for the organization. It really is a prerequisite. And I think it just increases the sustainability, the efficiency, the effectiveness of the organization in general. When I support an organization as a donor, as a philanthropist, I want to know that the nonprofit, the charity, is using their resources effectively, resources financial, but also that the leadership team, that the executive directors, the CEOs, the board of directors are using their time well, and their attention, and identifying as many opportunities for partnership as possible, and identifying as many opportunities to connect with funders and donors as possible. So I'm going to give a little shameless plug for the Athena Advisors right now and talk about two different services that we offer related to technology. And I'll share how we're kind of playing our part to build this more transparent future that Sarah talked about. But so one of the service lines, I'm calling it a tech audit. Robin, we may need to brainstorm names and how we market this. I love it. This is a service that we've provided a number of times, and that we've even engaged in internally for ourselves, which is helping nonprofits and charities assess their technical landscape, particularly their CRMs and their donor databases, and recommending alternative. It is like a checkup. I love that. Yeah. And a lot of this process is about being supportive of the organization and sort of facilitating a reflection process and kind of guiding the organization and the team through a process. We sort of map out their ecosystem, what technology the organizations are using to communicate with their donors on a mass level, what systems they're using, what CRM they're using. and we engage with the organizations to reflect on the needs of the team. And then we identify different products that can meet those essential needs, and we engage in sort of an evaluation process to make a final recommendation on what technology we think will serve the organization in the best fashion, which meets their budget, which can streamline communications and efficiencies. And I think it's really important, especially with smaller nonprofits who might not have a technical expert on the team, or have sort of invested in an ad hoc sort of way in different pieces of technology that maybe they could abandon some of those technologies and just find a more efficient tool that does everything that they need to do, or more serves more functions. So that's the tech up. And then the other service line is Athena Analytics, where we work with charities and nonprofits to screen their database through a wealth screening platform. We use a platform called iWave, and I really love the product. It aggregates over 40 different publicly available data sets, and then uses an algorithm to provide a rating system, a quantitative rating system, for all of the donors in the database. And it also provides additional information like, are these individuals sitting on other boards? And what is each person's wealth capacity to give, propensity to be philanthropic, and affinity for a certain cause. And the value in this is it allows the organization to identify more Larrys. Like who are the donors who have been giving the longest and who have the most capacity and most interest in supporting the organization. And it allows us to advise leadership teams and fundraising teams in general on where to invest their time and energy, and what relationships are the most promising to explore. It's just a first step. Sarah and I had a lot of discussions about how technology and data is just the first step. I can provide quantitative numbers that estimate what these relationships could potentially look like and what the result could be, but it requires someone writing a note or picking up the phone, going on a discovery call, because AI can't write a handwritten letter yet. I don't know, maybe it can, but I think that there are aspects of the human connection that can't really be replaced by technology. So those are two different service lines that we offer here at Athena Advisors. So we're playing our part in trying to move the industry forward for fundraisers and philanthropists alike. So let's see here. We're moving into our concluding remarks. I'd love to hear from you all about your reaction to all of this. Are you feeling excited? Is there more information that you would like to hear about specific questions? Do you still think tech and data is overwhelming, or are these problems insurmountable, or are you feeling hopeful about the future and these trends moving forward? Love to hear your feedback and any questions you may have.
The comment about the trend with moving toward more risk-taking and innovation, how are you using data to do that? Like, how are you using data to support that in the work that you do?
Thank you. I'm assuming that's the question to me. Thank you for that, Peggy. So basically, that is the work that we're doing is around charitable giving. I see that slice of risk-taking kind of looked at more as a financial asset class. So basically, it is more into the risk and rewards, which takes it more into really more into risk and rewards numbers. So not something that Charizone is doing, but very aware of it and very excited about it, especially with my banking background. But it is really looking at philanthropy as an asset class in finance, where you are the philanthropists are taking the first step, and their risk and reward equation is much more towards the social impact. But would love to hear if you have any experience with the innovation and with that slice of philanthropy.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. The trends are interesting, and I think great. Looking at what is the data, how is the data and how you're using data following those trends or creating those trends, right? Being out in the forefront of that. So,
yes, Robin, are you?
I love this conversation. I wonder what your thoughts are. A number of our clients are trying to find metrics for things that are difficult to quantify. So we have a client, for example, that works on peace and reconciliation and forgiveness, believe it or not, and they do it in Rwanda. So they're not, just having these are big efforts, but funders, I think, fairly say, of the many programs that are out there, why should we support your efforts to increase in schools and countries? The idea, how do people learn forgiveness and reconciliation? I think these are the kinds of things that are really hard to quantify. And I wonder if you have thoughts or some success stories about this. What are your thoughts on the things that are hard to quantify?
My brain works in putting things in boxes. I'll probably work very, very hard to find ways to measure, track anything linking to such a social, invaluable and just intangible outcome. But this takes us to the again, this is a lot of material for webinars. This takes us into the impact reporting and the impact measurement, which is just totally a different beast and a different animal.
Fair enough.
We find a lot of, it's just that the whole I don't think anyone agrees or is able to agree on a unique or unified measurement. From our Charizone's perspective, and we've said that to the community, we take the higher overview, which is you're a charity, your mission is your charitable mission and vision. That's what you exist for. Is it your priority? Can you demonstrate that this is what you're looking for? Can you demonstrate that you have a way of tracking inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, and that you can tell that they're not the same and they're different? There is a way of looking at a higher overview to create the narrative around the impact, which is engaging with the public you're serving. Thanks to Larry again. Stakeholder engagement, how the use of the resources, if there's anything else. There are five kind of topics that can consistently work around any impact measurement. But there is, for example, I looked at defining the word generosity. How do you define generosity? If the mission is generosity, there is a way of financially, there's time, there is, if we work hard enough, there will be a way of measuring it, because ultimately generosity or reconciliation is not just a reconciliation. It is for a better living and it's for a different outcome. So I just think a lot of conversations, but again, I'm not someone who promotes impact measurement throughout. I think we need to be a bit more sensible and less academic about these topics.
Sarah and I had several conversations about the challenge of measuring impact or outcomes versus outputs. I think organizations do a much better job because I think it's easier to track outputs. How many events did you host? How many publications did you, produce and publish? How many meals did you serve? How many people did you provide shelter to? It's really challenging to put numbers and to measure the larger impact and outcomes. I mean, these are like a lot of charities and a lot of nonprofits are addressing these wicked social problems that are just, it's incredibly challenging to, I think, quantify and operationalize what you do as an organization and the larger impact that you have. There are so many externalities to consider, and it's hard to even like make a case for causation versus correlation. But Robin, I'd love to hear.
Well, I just want to say, in the spirit of the topic at hand around philanthropy, Jackie, your original description of how you engaged with data, really asking the right questions. So I want to bring it full circle that this is that if you take a look at your donors and you say, gee, we're getting the most money from people who have given gifts, 5 gifts or more, or you say people who have been involved with us for X amount of time, or our monthly givers give Y, really, it's pretty clear where money is coming from, and then how do you cultivate that group? And that is what you did with really to very good effect at your media organization. So maybe we'll leave the impact of programming, the challenge of that to the program side of an organization, knowing that
Sure.
the philanthropy side of the organization, who are most of the people on this call, can see where the money is coming from, which is why data is so powerful.
Robin, thank you for bringing it back full circle. Like as we continue to echo, these topics are so expansive and there are so many different lenses to look through and angles to take. Sarah, I saw that you had a thought.
Yeah, and I'm just also aware of time. And one thing to say, actually, Robin, is this whole kind of, when you're not having a measurement of impact for a topic such as reconciliation or generosity, but the heart of it, I think this way one would be able to connect with, on the values front, with the philanthropist. So somebody, and this is where the heart meets the heart and where the values are aligned. I think if you're looking for someone who wants an impact report with numbers on reconciliation, they might find that this is not the right partner for that organization, and you want somebody who wants to build something more long term and in it for really the outcomes. But it's just another way of saying it's not only about data. It cannot only be about data.
Well, I'm going to jump in there. Now there is this gap and so many interesting questions have been addressed, and so much interesting discussion. For me, what I'm really taking away is the importance of personalized communications, better engagement, trust, and the need for connection. Because I think and if you've read Jackie's blog post on her kind of journey from being a very anti-data is the wrong, well, I suppose you kind of were, Jackie. You were really nervous to interact with numbers and felt that wasn't the kind of that wasn't the kind of skills you had, and your realization that it is really so about relationships, and then that clicked for you. And so I think, yeah, as someone that's really, I wouldn't call myself anti-data, but I'm not confident using big numbers, and I've always been the kind of on the social social side of things, with kind of big into literature at school, and I was never the maths girl. I think it is so important, and we can't overlook the importance to all of our lives, increasingly so. So thank you both so much. That was so insightful. And thank you all for being here. Oh, Robin's popped Jackie's blog post.
Thank you.
Chat. And we'll next be back in August with Food for Thought, where actually we're looking at literature, on the role of literature in social justice. So a complete juxtaposition, but linked in many ways. So yeah, that just leaves me to say thank you so much once again to Jackie and to Sarah. That was really a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you
very
Lucy.
much. Thank you, everyone.
You all.